Alright, so this lesson is chapter 5. There are 3 or 4 little lessons in here, and so this is just the first one. And all of these have to do with the selection tools. And so just like in Illustrator, you have to select it to affect it. The same rule applies in Photoshop. So these are just different ways to select your object or whatever it is. Alright, so I'm not going to demonstrate how to go to the share drive, and I'm encouraging you to drag the folder onto your desktop like I've got here. So I want you to just know how to do that, I guess, and I'm not going to demonstrate it each time. So you're going to open up, actually you're not going to open it because I'm not including it, but you're just going to look, and you've got this error message here that says, what would you like to do? Just say, okay. And this is the first lesson that we're going to do. This is the done file. So it's like an ad for a car. It's kind of silly, but that is what we're going to work on. And then you're going to also open up the PS0501 file. And it comes with these guides. These are called guides, these sort of cyan colored lines that will be included in this lesson for you. So don't get rid of those. If you wanted to get rid of those, if you wanted to know how to get rid of those, you would just say clear guides. But don't get rid of them until you're all done. Okay. So first thing you want to do is go File, Save As, and you're just going to add the underscore work. It should be a PSD format, so don't change that. And then don't just hit save because you would put it in the wrong place. You got to put it in your documents. Hopefully you've got a graphic design or intro to computer graphics folder, and then you should put it in another folder, a subfolder within that called Chapter 5. That would be ideal. I'm just going to stick mine on the desktop momentarily, but that is what you should do. And when you get this, just hit OK. And now it's saved in the right spot. Alright, so we're going to use the rectangular marquee tool, which is right below the move tool. So these first few tools on your toolbar are your selection tools. So those are all the ones that we're going to be using throughout this lesson. You don't want to use the rectangle tool down here. That is a vector shape tool that we actually don't use very often in Photoshop. So don't use those. And then this arrow down here, that's not your selection arrow that you're going to be using for the most part. That's only if you do use a vector shape, you would use one of these arrows. But if you just are making a selection, which is a marquee, using one of these marquee tools, then you're going to use the move tool, the top one here. That's why it's on top, because you use it so much. You're going to use that for 90% of what you do in Photoshop. So I've noticed that a bunch of you are trying to use this arrow down here, and that's wrong. So the rectangular marquee tool, it should be visible, but if it's not, just click and hold and select the rectangular marquee. And you want to go up to View here and make sure that Snap is checked. If it's not checked, then hover over this and release your mouse and highlight that so it's got a check mark next to it. And we are going to make a selection inside of these guides here. And so the Snap tool is when you get close, it'll jump. And sort of like a magnet, it'll jump to your guides so that you know it's accurate. And we don't need to worry too much about that. So, but if that's bugging you, like if you're doing something else, then check to see if Snap is on and maybe turn it off if that's not something that you want. Alright, so we made that little selection. If you did it wrong or you want to try it again, I would suggest using Control D to deselect and then try it again rather than Control Z to undo, although that would work as well. It's just you want to avoid using Control Z in Photoshop. It doesn't, because you've got such limitations with it, I would just avoid using it if possible. Okay, so now we're going to add an adjustment to this selection. And adjustments is in your default setting. It's in your Essentials workspace. So it should just be here already, this panel. If it's not, then go up to Window and turn on Adjustments. There should be a check mark. And we're going to add a curve adjustment. So curves, if you hover over these, they tell you what they are. It's the third one. And then you get this panel that comes up. And curves is important when you're working in photography. You adjust curves a lot. You can adjust this line so that it bends and it adjusts the lightness and darkness and color. It's pretty confusing to use, so I'm not going to, that's not what I meant to do. Try that again. Okay. And I'm not going to go into this too much, but you want to pull that panel down so that you can see where it says input and output. And then we are going to drag the anchor on the end. These are my shadows in this. This is a histogram for those of you that aren't familiar with digital photography. This is a histogram and it tells you how many points of, say, black. This edge over here is black. You can see the little black thing down there and a white one down here. Stop. Those are called stops. So we have a lot of black points in this particular file. So there's a lot of black in here, and so there's a lot of pixels that are black, and so it just gives you a chart or a graph of how many pixels are this particular shade of black. And so there's 255 different shades, and so it's a graph, and each time there's a pixel that's a particular shade, it puts it in on this graph. Okay, you probably don't care. So anyway, I'm going to select my anchor, my black anchor down here, and I'm going to drag it down and undo that. Okay, let's try that again. Oh, I lost my selection. That's what's going on. There we go. Okay, so now it's just selecting, or it's just affecting my selection. Okay, so you want the output to say 20, and so it's just affected my what was inside the rectangular marquee. So that is what I want it to look like. Oh. So inside your panel options, I forgot to do something here. Curve display options. There we go. So if you already did it, mine is correct because I actually changed this before, but it might have looked like this. The default is to be on light, and you actually want it to be on pigment ink so that your histogram looks like mine. So mine already was like that, and you may have to back it up. So again, it's always a good idea to keep your history panel open so that you can go back and fix things. Alright, so moving on, sorry about that little mistake there. So you're going to find this layer called poster text. I'm going to close that up by hitting the double arrow because I don't need that anymore. This poster text layer, there is not a little eyeball over here, so I want to turn that on. And here we go. Here's my text. It's already built into the file for you. So that just turned it on. I don't know what kind of car this is, but it doesn't really matter. So go ahead and do a quick save on this, and then we'll move on. Alright, so click on the background layer down here, and we should still be on the rectangular marquee tool, which is what we should be on. And you're just going to make a selection. Actually, go ahead and start your selection, but then hold down Shift because we want it to be square. And you're just going to kind of enclose the tail light and make sure that you release the mouse before you release the Shift key. That's important. So it should look something like that. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it does have to be a square, not a rectangle. Okay, so just something to point out here. So I'm still in the rectangular marquee, and just pointing out that at this point I can click and drag and move it around. And then I'm going. Okay, just pause it for a second and coming back. But anyway, so you can move your selection around when you're still in the marquee tool. But once you switch over to the move tool, when you come in here, you can see it turns into a pair of scissors. Okay, so I just paused it and came back, and I'm not totally sure where I was, but you'll notice that when you click on the move tool and then try and move your selection, it doesn't work. You can see there's a little pair of scissors on my cursor. So if I do that, it actually moves that chunk of the picture, which I don't want to do. So Control Z to put that back in place. So again, you just want to be in the marquee tool if you wanted to actually move your selection. Okay, so now I'm going to kind of, I'm doing this because the book says to do it. You can make adjustments with this adjustment panel here, which is what we did here, and it added another layer, and so I could actually adjust my adjustment. So I could go in and edit that that curve adjustment that we did. But this way, the way the book is saying to do it now, is to go to Image, Adjustments, and Hue, Saturation. So any of these are actually going to affect the pixels themselves. It's not going to add a layer on top, which I could remove or take away or adjust further. I can't go back in and adjust this. Once it's done, it's done. So in the old days of like prior to CS5, so the version we're using is CS6. So anything before CS5, I believe, you didn't have this adjustment panel. It didn't add a layer. It may actually have started in CS4, but I'm forgetting. In any case, it's relatively new, and it's a big deal. It's a big advantage to be able to have your adjustment on its own layer so that you can still edit that adjustment that you've done. So anyway, this is how we used to do it back in the day. And so you're adjusting. Let me move this so you can see what it's doing. You're going to adjust the hue of that particular selection that we have. And so it's only going to select what's inside, or it's only going to affect what's inside our selection. And it says that you can use any color you want. So there, I'm going to use that magenta color. And so you're just going to choose a different color for that particular section of the piece. If we flip back over and look at the done, there's this sort of yellowish I don't even know, greenish brown color. Very cute. And then we go back here. And that's what mine looks like. So you're free to choose whatever you want. And then go ahead and save it. Okay, so now we're going to switch to the elliptical marquee tool. We are done with that. You can do Control D, or as soon as we would do the next move, it would deselect anyway. We're still on the background layer, so just make sure that you're on the background layer. And now what we want to do is we want to select the tire. So we're using the elliptical marquee because it's going to make a circle. We also want to hold down Alt and Shift. So I'm pressing down Alt and Shift. So Alt is going to start my selection from the center. So here's my selection. I'm just clicking and starting without pressing Alt. And so my selection started on one side of the circle, which is where I started. So Control D, get rid of that. So when I hold down Alt, it actually starts, my selection starts in the center of the circle. And then when I add Shift, it makes it an actual circle and not an oval or some random shape. Alright, so release the mouse and then release Shift and Alt at the same time. So now I've got the tire pretty well selected. Another thing you can do, I'm going to hit Control D, hold down Alt Shift, do this again, and you gotta, it's like playing piano where you gotta have to have your fingers just right. If I hold down Shift, I can move it around as I'm going. So that's Shift. And when I release Shift, I can adjust the size, and when I hold down Shift, I can move it around. So release the mouse, whoa, and then all the modifier keys that you had pressed down. So hopefully that made sense. You couldn't actually see what I was doing, but hopefully I explained it well enough. Alright, so another thing you can do to adjust your selection is go up to Select and Transform Selection. And so by doing this, you can adjust the selection. It's a little bit hard to tell kind of where it's going to end up with this. And then just like with Free Transform, you have to either accept it or cancel it. And if, I just want to point this out, if you were going to use Free Transform, Control T, you're actually changing the pixels, the picture itself. So don't do Free Transform. Don't think it's the same thing, because it's not. So it's Select, Transform Selection. Got it? Good. So let's see. Now you want to make sure it's still selected, your tire, and you're going to hit Control J, and that's going to put our selection on its own layer. So I don't know why it's J. They probably just ran out of other letters. But Control J is putting your selection onto a new layer so that it's isolated so that you can adjust it further or copy it or whatever. So we're going to add a filter to this layer, the whole layer. Filter, blur, and then motion blur. And so see how it looks like it's moving? That's pretty cool. You're going to type actually 0 for the angle, and I don't know what the default is here, but the distance should be 45. And then you can hit OK. Alright, so we're going to select the Move tool, which is the top one, not the arrow. And you are going to move the tire just slightly to the right. And then you're going to hit just the number 5. And so that's a shortcut. It changed the opacity of the layer to 50%. So if I would have typed 6, they would be 60%, and so on. So 5 changes it to 50%, and so it looks like it's moving, but just slightly. I could also use my arrow keys and mess with that a little. It's not as extreme as I would actually like it to be. So, alright, well, that is pretty much it. This is the, I'll say they moved theirs way further over. This is the done file, so compare yours to that. Hopefully it looks about the same. There. And you'll be submitting that to Schoology.